Imagine a universe where the lights are about to go out, not just on a single planet, but across thousands of star systems, countless civilizations, entire galaxies teetering on the edge of darkness. The alien Confederacy, a vast alliance of advanced species older than human history itself, has just made a terrifying announcement. Their energy reserves, the lifeblood of interstellar travel, communication, and survival, are almost gone. And without them, the fabric of their society will unravel, trade routes will vanish, planets will be cut off from one another, and trillions of lives will be thrown into chaos. Desperate, they send out a plea to every corner of the known universe, hoping for a miracle. But here's the twist. The ones who answer that call aren't the ancient, hyper-advanced races you'd expect. It's us, humanity, the species they once dismissed as insignificant, barely worth noticing among the stars. This isn't just a story about solving a problem. It's about proving what we're capable of when the impossible stares us in the face. The aliens gave us a week, one single week, to find a solution before their entire civilization collapses. And what happened next? Well, that's where things get interesting. Because while the rest of the galaxy saw us as underdogs, we saw something they didn't: opportunity. A chance to rewrite the rules, to take everything we've learned, our grit, our creativity, our refusal to back down, and turn it into something extraordinary. So how did we do it? How did a species that hadn't even mastered interstellar travel a few centuries ago crack a crisis that stumped civilizations a million years older? The answer isn't just about technology. It's about the way humans think. We don't see limits, we see puzzles. And when the galaxy needed us most, we didn't just rise to the occasion. We redefined it. This is the story of how humanity solved the alien energy crisis in a week, and in doing so, changed our place in the universe forever. Buckle up, because what comes next will make you look at our species in a whole new light. Dr. Elena Vasquez was elbows deep in a prototype reactor when the call came in. The lab was her sanctuary, a chaotic mess of equations scribbled on whiteboards, half-assembled machinery humming with untested potential, and the faint smell of burnt coffee from the pot she forgot to turn off 3 hours ago. When her phone buzzed with a priority alert, she almost ignored it. Another funding rejection, probably, but then the screen lit up with a seal she'd never seen before, a swirling, iridescent emblem that made her fingers freeze mid-calculus. 20 minutes later, she stood in a sealed chamber beneath the United Nations, facing beings that defied every law of biology she knew. Their skin shimmered like liquid mercury, their voices resonating in harmonies that made her teeth vibrate. The lead diplomat, she guessed it was the lead, given how the others subtly orbited around it, spoke without moving anything resembling a mouth. "Your species was not our first choice," it admitted, the words translating through a hovering drone. But desperation makes strange allies. Then they showed her the data, stars going dark, one by one, like candles snuffed by an unseen hand, entire colonies rationing power, ships stranded between systems, hospitals shutting down. The Confederacy's fusion cores the same technology humanity had spent decades trying to reverse engineer from debris. Were failing. Worse, they had no backup. "We have months," the diplomat said. "You have 7 days." Elena's stomach dropped. She was just a researcher who'd published too many papers about theoretical energy loops, not some galaxy-saving prodigy. But as the holographic displays flickered with dying stars, one thought cut through the panic. They'd come to the wrong species if they wanted surrender. Humans didn't know how to lose. We'd spent our entire history turning impossibility into breakfast. And as the aliens waited for her answer, Elena realized something terrifying and electrifying. They weren't just giving her a deadline, they were giving her a blank check. "Show me everything," she said. The room held its breath. Somewhere in the back of her mind, equations were already rearranging themselves, a puzzle snapping into focus. The aliens had millennia of knowledge. Humanity had something better, the audacity to try. The alien High Chancellor's laughter wasn't the warm kind. It rattled the glassware on the conference table like a seismic tremor. Wexler loomed over Elena, his iridescent exoskeleton catching the light in predatory ripples. "Your species still burns fossilized carbon for warmth," he sneered, mandibles clicking in derision. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably, their bioluminescent markings pulsing embarrassment for this foolish mammal. Elena didn't flinch. She'd spent years defending wild theories to skeptical committees, and this was just another room full of closed minds, albeit with extra limbs. "We stopped digging up dead dinosaurs for fuel before your first scout ship even entered our solar system," she said, tapping the data pad between them. The screen lit up with schematics that made Wexler's antennae twitch, a lattice of quantum filaments wrapped around what looked like pure vacuum. "That's impossible," hissed a jellyfish-like scientist from the far end of the table, its gelatinous body quivering. "Harnessing quantum fluctuations requires energies beyond your crude containment capabilities." Elena's grin held all the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 3 all-nighters duct taping a prototype reactor in her garage. "Crude, maybe. Effective, absolutely." She flicked her wrist, and the schematics exploded into a simulation, a microscopic singularity dancing at the center of a magnetic web, drinking energy from the void itself. The room temperature dropped 5 degrees as every alien present recognized the implications. Wexler's carapace darkened to an angry violet. "Prove this isn't theoretical." His voice carried the weight of collapsing stars. In response, Elena pulled a small metallic sphere from her pocket, scuffed from repeated testing, still warm to the touch. When she tossed it onto the table, it didn't roll, it hovered. A faint hum filled the air as the sphere began emitting soft blue light, brighter and brighter until the shadows of astonished aliens stretched across the walls. "Meet Charlie," Elena said, patting the device affectionately. "Our college intern named it. He runs on nothing but space itself." The sphere pulsed as if in agreement, casting eerie highlights across Wexler's stunned face plates. For the first time in recorded history, the High Chancellor of the Confederacy had nothing to say, and in that silence, something shifted. The aliens had come expecting to dictate terms to primitive upstarts. Instead, they found themselves staring at the one thing their millennia of perfect logic couldn't account for: humanity's ability to turn "that'll never work" into "watch this." Elena didn't waste a single second. The moment the aliens dismissed her, still muttering about primate physics, she was already typing a priority alert into her comm. Not to the usual government contacts, the polished bureaucrats who'd spend weeks debating protocol. No, she pinged the outliers, the ones whose names popped up in classified research papers with footnotes like "results unverified" or "methodology unorthodox." The kind of people who made career advisors, Sci, and security teams sweat. First on the list, Raj Patel. The man had been blacklisted by 3 space agencies for attempting to retrofit a Mars lander with salvaged alien tech using nothing but duct tape and sheer stubbornness. When Elena's call buzzed through his cluttered workshop, he answered mid-solder, goggles askew. "Vasquez, you're either about to get me arrested or make me famous." She projected the Confederacy's energy schematics onto his wall. "Worse," she said, "I need you to break the laws of physics in 6 days." Raj's grin could have powered a small city. Next came Dr. Lin Yao, the quantum theorist who'd been laughed out of her own tenure review for suggesting vacuum energy could be tapped like a keg. Then Mikhail Volkov, the ex-Soviet engineer who spoke more fluently to machines than humans. By midnight, Elena's lab looked less like a research facility and more like the aftermath of a hurricane whiteboards crammed with equations in 6 different handwriting styles, half-disassembled alien components sparking ominously on the floor, and a coffee maker someone had jury-rigged to dispense liquid nitrogen. Raj held up a mangled piece of alien alloy, now fused with what looked like a car battery. "Their infrastructure's too delicate," he muttered, like a souffle wrapped in silk. "We need to give them a diesel engine." Lynn spun a holographic model between her hands, squinting. "Except diesel engines explode under quantum strain." Mikhail didn't look up from his soldering iron. "Everything explodes if you overclock it enough. Question is, do we care?" The team worked in shifts, surviving on adrenaline and questionable vending machine snacks. At one point, an alien observer drifted in, took one look at the chaos, and left without a word. Elena caught Raj scribbling on a napkin, a sketch of their prototype grafted onto a Confederacy starbase. "If we pull this off," he murmured, smudging the ink with his thumb, "we'll rewrite the galaxy's future." Outside the lab's reinforced windows, dawn was breaking over a world that had no idea its most reckless minds were busy saving the universe. And then, somewhere between Mikhail's 4th energy drink and Lynn's breakthrough involving a microwave and a gravity coil, it worked. The device hummed to life, not with the elegant precision of alien tech, but with the defiant roar of something built in a garage by people who refused to lose. Elena exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The galaxy had given them a week. Humanity had answered in 4 days. Now came the fun part, watching the Confederacy's faces when they realized their primitive solution didn't just work. It outperformed their own designs by a factor of 3. The prototype screamed like a living thing before it died, a shrieking crescendo of overloading circuits and buckling containment fields. Emergency lights bathed the lab in pulsing red as Elena shielded her eyes against the flare of failing quantum stabilizers. Somewhere behind her, Raj was shouting numbers that kept spiking into the danger zone. The air smelled of ionized metal and something far worse, the sharp, acrid tang of imminent failure. Then came the explosion, not the fiery kind humans were used to, but something far stranger, a ripple in reality itself that warped the lab's walls like funhouse mirrors before snapping back into place. When the smoke cleared, half their equipment was melted into abstract sculpture. The alien observers, previously lingering at a safe distance, had retreated entirely. Only Mikhail remained unfazed, poking a smoking control panel with a screwdriver. "Huh," he muttered, "that shouldn't have happened." Elena wasn't listening. She was too busy staring at the wreckage of their prototype and the alien fusion core they'd integrated into its design. The core's delicate latticework was fused into a twisted wreck, but the human-built components around it. They'd bent, not broken, not failed, bent like a tree in a hurricane. They'd flexed under forces that should have shattered them. A laugh burst out of her, sharp and sudden. Raj shot her a look usually reserved for the clinically insane. "We just nearly tore a hole in space-time, and you're laughing." Elena wiped soot from her tablet, pulling up the Confederacy's original schematics. "Their systems are perfect," she said, tracing the flawless symmetry of alien engineering. "Every component optimized, every variable accounted for, but perfection is brittle." She tapped the screen where their own jury-rigged monstrosity had survived catastrophic failure. "We built something messy, something adaptable. Their tech treats reality like a clock tick-tock, precise and unchanging. Ours," she gestured at the still smoldering reactor, "ours treats reality like a conversation." The lab fell silent. Lynn crouched beside the wreckage, running fingers over warped metal. You're saying their fatal flaw is being too good. Exactly. Elena's voice dropped, charged with the quiet intensity of a revelation. They've spent millennia refining systems to handle exactly what they expect. But space doesn't play by rules. Quantum fluctuations, dark energy tides their reactors fail because they can't improvise. Ours, she kicked a twisted support beam, it rattled but held. Ours are built by a species that spent its entire existence making terrible, beautiful mistakes. Across the room, the alien monitoring drone buzzed to life, projecting a hologram of Vexler's scowling faceplate. Your attempts are amusing, he intoned, mandibles clicking in disdain, but chaos is not a solution. Elena met his gaze without flinching. She held up a chunk of their ruined prototype, the human-built stabilizer, scorched but intact, wrapped around the shattered remains of alien perfection. Funny, she said, because from where I'm standing, chaos just outlasted godhood. Outside, unnoticed by anyone, the first stars of evening winked into view. Somewhere among them, thousands of alien reactors were failing, and in a ruined lab on Earth, 4 humans stood amidst the smoking aftermath of their own glorious disaster, grinning like they'd already won. The lights in the lab flickered once, just long enough for Elena to glance up from her workbench before going dark entirely, not the usual brownout from overloading the grid. This was different, surgical. The backup generators didn't kick in. The hum of alien climate control died mid-cycle, leaving the air eerily still. Raj's voice cut through the blackness, tense with realization that wasn't an accident. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, outside too light to be human, too deliberate to be friendly. Elena barely had time to yank the emergency shutdown lever on their prototype before the door hissed open. Counselor Zyrak's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the cold glow of his personal energy field. His mandibles flexed in what might have been a smile. "A pity," he murmured, stepping over scattered tools. "Such promising work, such fragile systems." Before anyone could move, his entourage fanned out alien technicians in Confederacy uniforms, their hands flickering with handheld disruptors. They didn't ask questions, didn't make threats, just began methodically dismantling every piece of equipment, their tools emitting high-pitched whines as they fried circuits beyond repair. Lynn lunged forward, only for Zyrak to extend a single clawed limb, stopping her without touch. "Resist," he said softly, "and your species' involvement ends tonight." The sabotage took less than 10 minutes. When they left, the lab wasn't just disabled, it was erased, wiped clean as if no breakthrough had ever happened. The only thing they missed was Mikhail's battered toolkit, kicked under a desk during the chaos. Elena crouched in the wreckage, picking up a shattered date, a crystal. Raj exhaled sharply through his nose. Well, that's one way to say thanks for trying. But Zyrak hadn't accounted for one thing. Humans didn't need state-of-the-art labs to innovate. We'd invented penicillin from moldy bread, built nuclear reactors with slide rules. Elena's fingers closed around Mikhail's toolkit, her mind already racing through back-alley suppliers, black market gear, every underground contact she'd made during her years skirting regulations. Across the room, Lynn was scribbling equations on the wall with a smuggled grease pencil. Raj caught Elena's eye and grinned, wild and unfazed. "Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way." By midnight, they'd relocated to a decommissioned subway tunnel beneath the city, one of Mikhail's retirement projects. The space reeked of damp concrete and ozone, lit by jury-rigged work lamps. Their new lab consisted of scavenged parts, a microwave oven turned into a spectrometer, a dentist's laser repurposed for quantum calibration. It shouldn't have worked. It couldn't have worked, and yet Elena held up their first makeshift core, cobbled together from a motorcycle battery and what looked like a salad spinner. It pulsed weakly, then steadied, not pretty, not efficient, but alive. Somewhere above them, Zyrak's faction was doubtless congratulating themselves on crushing human ambition. They'd forgotten the oldest rule of survival: pressure doesn't extinguish fire, it forges diamonds. The subway tunnel echoed with the clatter of makeshift tools when the air itself seemed to split open, a vertical seam of violet light ripping through the darkness like a zipper. Elena barely had time to grab a wrench before a figure stepped through, their silhouette blurred by an active stealth field that flickered like bad reception. Then the field collapsed, revealing an alien unlike any Confederacy envoy they'd seen before. No polished carapace, no hovering dignitary drones, just scarred plating cobbled together from salvaged tech, and eyes that burned with the same feverish intensity as Raj during an all-nighter. Kael'is, the alien, rasped, tapping a cracked insignia on their chest, a Confederacy scientist's emblem, deliberately defaced. "You're smaller than your reputation suggests." Their voice was a gritty whisper, layered with harmonics that made Elena's teeth ache. Before anyone could react, Kael'is tossed a satchel onto the workbench. It hit the surface with a dense thud, the fabric falling open to reveal crystalline matrices humming with captive energy. Alien tech, but rougher, unshackled. Mikhail let out a noise halfway between a gasp and a curse, already reaching for his soldering iron. Lynn was less impressed. "And we're supposed to trust you, why?" She didn't lower the dented fire extinguisher she'd grabbed as a makeshift weapon. Kael'is laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "You shouldn't." They gestured at the ruined lab around them. "But Zyrak's purge didn't just target your species. Half my research team's in hiding." A holoprojector built into their wrist flared to life, displaying schematics Elena recognized instantly: Confederacy power grids, but annotated with frantic corrections in an alien script. Their reactors fail because they refuse to admit spacetime has wrinkles, too busy pretending the universe is polite. Raj whistled low, tracing a finger through the hologram. "You're saying their math's too clean. Clean math kills civilizations." Kael'is spat. They leaned in, the glow of the holoprojector etching shadows under their eyes. "I can get you materials, scraps they won't miss, but if you're caught..." Elena didn't let them finish. She was already slotting one of the smuggled crystals into their patched-together core. It fit like it was made for human hands. "Tell me something," she said, watching the device shudder to life with a deeper, steadier hum. "Why risk helping the primitive mammals?" Kael'is' answering smile showed too many teeth. "Because while my people were busy perfecting the impossible, yours kept inventing new ways to break it." "Now hurry." They tossed Elena a data chip that reeked of burnt ozone. "That's every fault line in their containment protocols. Exploit them." As the violet portal swallowed Kael'is whole, their final words hung in the air like a challenge. "Prove my people wrong, human. Show them innovation isn't treason." The team didn't need speeches. The core between them was pulsing now, alive in a way their previous attempts hadn't been. Not the obedient thrum of alien tech, but the erratic, joyous heartbeat of something born in a scrap heap. Raj wiped grease off his chin and grinned. "Well," he said, cracking his knuckles, "let's go commit some beautiful crimes against physics." Somewhere overhead, the city slept. And deep below its streets, 4 humans and a stolen dream began rewriting the future. Raj's fingers moved like they had a mind of their own, splicing alien fiber optic cables with stripped-down human wiring, soldering connections that no engineering manual would ever approve. The subway tunnel had transformed into a war room of crackling energy and nervous sweat. Every surface was covered in slapdash modifications. Mikhail's jury-rigged cooling system humming ominously in one corner, Lin frantically recalculating containment algorithms on a grease-stained tablet. And at the center of it all, their Frankenstein reactor pulsed with an unstable glow, its casing held together by literal duct tape and desperation. Elena watched as Raj jammed the final interface node into place, his knuckles white. "This'll either save us," he muttered, wiping grease across his forehead, "or blow us to stardust." The words hung in the air, heavier than the damp subway tunnel's humidity. Somewhere above them, trillions of lives were counting on this cobbled-together monstrosity, and the Confederacy had no idea its fate rested on a machine built by the species they'd called technologically infantile 3 days prior. The countdown began with a hiss of pressurized containment fields. Numbers flickered across stolen alien displays too fast for human eyes to track, but the meaning was clear. Systems sinking, power levels climbing. Somewhere in the void between stars, their jury-rigged solution was reaching out, threading itself into the Confederacy's dying energy grid like a rogue heartbeat. Then the lights dimmed, not just in the tunnel, but everywhere: monitors, holograms, even the faint glow of kael'is smuggled crystals. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. The reactor's hum stuttered, Lin's breath caught mid-exhale, and then the explosion never came. Instead, a sound none of them had expected, a cheer. Distant at first, muffled by layers of earth and concrete, but growing. Upstairs, in the streets across the planet, humanity was staring at screens broadcasting live from the edge of known space. Confederacy starbases, dark for weeks, were flickering back to life, not with the sterile blue of their original reactors, but with the wild, gold-tinged pulse of human engineering. Raj sagged against the workbench, half laughing, half choking. "We just hacked an interstellar empire." Mikhail, ever practical, was already poking at the reactor's overheating casing with a screwdriver. Hacked, improved, same difference, but Elena wasn't celebrating yet. She was watching the displays as alien energy grids stabilized, not perfectly, not elegantly, but stubbornly. Resiliently, the way human systems always had, because that was their real breakthrough, wasn't it? They hadn't just plugged a hole in someone else's failing tech. They taught the galaxy how to bend without breaking, and as the first official transmission from the Confederacy High Council blinked onto their scavenged monitor, halting, staticky, but unmistakably urgent, Elena realized something terrifying. The aliens weren't just grateful, they were scared, because humanity hadn't just fixed their crisis. We'd shown them how reckless, how gloriously unstable, how utterly human the future could be. The reactor's hum deepened, shifting from the uneven sputter of prototypes past into something steady, something alive. Lights flickered across the subway tunnel's makeshift control panels as energy readings spiked, then stabilized. Not the flawless symmetry of Confederacy tech, but a rhythm like a human heartbeat, stubborn, adaptable, unmistakably ours. Lin's fingers flew over the cracked touchscreen, her voice tight with disbelief. "It's holding, actually holding." Then the holographic feed from kael'is bloomed above the workbench, showing a distant Confederacy outpost, its darkened corridors suddenly pulsing with gold-tinged light. Alien technicians froze mid-repair, their multiple eyes widening as their dead systems rebooted in a cascade of human-engineered defiance. One of them reached out, tentatively, to touch a reactivated console. The image trembled as kael'is' voice cut through, their usual sardonic tone replaced by something verging on awe, transmitting data to the High Chancellor now. "Prepare for static." Then a new voice, resonant with the weight of millennia, filled the tunnel. Vexler himself, the hologram resolved into his angular faceplate, but the imperious sneer was gone. In its place, something no human had ever seen on a Confederacy elder's face: doubt. His mandibles clicked once, twice, before he spoke. If this scales. The words hung like a tectonic shift. Chaos erupted in the tunnel. Raj whooped, knocking over a stool. Mikhail actually hugged Lynn, which was more shocking than the reactor working. But Elena didn't move. She was watching Vexler's hologram flicker. Seeing the moment his gaze dropped to something off-screen, another feed, perhaps, showing hundreds of reactors sinking to their design across the galaxy. When he looked back, his voice wasn't grateful, it was terrified. "You will be our saviors." The transmission cut, the reactor hummed on, and somewhere in the dark above them, the first alien news drones began circling human cities, broadcasting a single, galaxy-shaking headline: "The apocalypse has been postponed." By primates, success tasted like burnt wiring and recycled subway air, but it was still sweet. The reactor's hum had barely stabilized before Raj was already scaling their stolen alien schematics, projecting holographic blueprints across the tunnel's grimy walls. "We need 12 more," he announced, fingers dancing through the diagrams. "Minimum, and that's just to keep the core systems from collapsing." Lynn didn't look up from her calculations. "We also need 6,000 tons of quantum alloy, 300 flawless crystalline matrices, and a miracle." The miracle arrived via back-channel scattered reports from kael'is' network of dissident engineers, whispering of hidden shipyards and black market stashes. But every route was a gamble. Confederacy cruisers loomed over supply lanes like steel storms, their ion trails etching blockade patterns across the stars. Zyrak wasn't just playing defense now, he was erasing their options one transit route at a time. Mikhail tossed a wrench onto the workbench with a clatter. "Forget smuggling, we go loud." His grin was all teeth. "Broadcast the schematics open source. Let every species with a welder and a grudge start building." Elena's stomach lurched at the idea. Unleashing their patchwork tech meant no control, no safeguards, just 1,000 unstable reactors blooming like supernova across the galaxy. But the alternative was worse. She activated the comm array before doubt could take root. The feed connected not to some shadowy backroom, but to every public channel the Confederacy monitored. "Let them hear this, people of the Confederacy." Her voice echoed through the tunnel, raw and unfiltered. "Your leaders are cutting supply lines while your children shiver in the dark. So here's the truth, our fix works, and we're sending it to you." She held up a day to crystal, its surface etched with the jagged beauty of human engineering. "Stop us, and you doom your own people." Somewhere in the void, she imagined Zyrak's mandibles tightening. "Let him." The first schematic packet burst transmitted before the jamming could start, ricocheting off relay stations and civilian boys like sparks from a wildfire. By midnight, rogue shipyards on 7 worlds were already retooling, and deep in the subway, as their reactor thrummed defiantly against the dark, Elena whispered the only thing left to say: "Run fast. Build faster." The galaxy was listening. The first explosion rocked a Confederacy shipyard orbiting the desert world of Zalthar, not from enemy fire, but from within. Security feeds showed maintenance crews overturning containment drones, their tools repurposed as weapons against Zyrak's enforcers. The revolt spread faster than any virus. Dockworkers on the crystalline spires of Vexus Prime rerouted cargo ships full of quantum alloy straight into rebel hands. By the time the news reached Earth, entire sectors had become battlegrounds, not between species, but between those who clung to control and those who tasted something new: hope. Elena's team watched the feeds from their subway bunker, breath-catching as a mob of alien engineers stormed a blockade station. The footage shook violently. Someone was filming from the hip, dodging energy fire. Then a voice cut through the chaos, high-pitched, furious. A young tech with bioluminescent markings, still fading from adolescence, stood atop a wrecked patrol drone, shouting into the din. They gave us light when our own rulers left us in darkness. The crowd stilled just long enough for her next words to hit like a plasma torch. Let the humans work. The phrase became a chant, a battering ram. Across a dozen worlds, alien citizens who'd never met a human tore apart Zyrax's barricades with their bare claws, clearing landing zones for shipments marked with Elena's slapdash insignia, a crudely drawn helix inside a gear. Mikhail laughed hoarsely as a merchant fleet broadcasted their manifest, 12,000 tons of materials liberated from high-security depots. We've started an intergalactic mutiny, he muttered, scrolling through increasingly frantic Confederacy bulletins. Raj spun in his chair, grinning at the holographic map now showing green across half the contested systems. Correction, we gave them an excuse. They've wanted to burn the system down for centuries. High above Earth, the first rebel ships began arriving, not sleek Confederacy vessels, but patchwork freighters with holds full of scavenged tech and wide-eyed alien crews. One captain, her exoskeleton still scorched from a skirmish, pressed a data crystal into Elena's palm. From kael'is, she rasped, they're calling it the human contingency. Entire colonies are building your reactors in secret. The crystal's contents made Lynn swear in 3 languages. Schematics, yes, but also casualty reports. Zyrax's purge had hit harder than they'd known. Laboratories burned, engineers executed. The Confederacy's perfect order had cracked under its own weight, and through those cracks poured something far more dangerous than rebellion, pragmatism. Down in the tunnels, as another shipment of liberated parts clattered onto makeshift conveyor belts, Elena realized the truth. This wasn't just about energy anymore. It was about proving that survival could be messy, that innovation didn't require permission, and as the galaxy's disenfranchised rallied behind a single, impossible idea, trusting the species that duct-taped solutions together, she understood the real stakes. They weren't just powering reactors now, they were powering a revolution. Warning klaxons shrieked through the reactor chamber as the numbers on the main display plummeted towards 0. Elena's fingers flew across the console, rerouting power through circuits never meant to handle this kind of strain, the containment fields buckling. Lynn shouted over the cacophony, her voice cracking on the last syllable as a support beam groaned overhead. Raj didn't hesitate. He was already halfway up the access ladder, wrench clenched between his teeth like some ancient Earth pirate boarding an enemy ship. Overrides jammed from the control deck. He yelled around the metal, kicking open a maintenance hatch. Gotta trip it manually. The crawl space beyond shimmered with lethal levels of radiation, enough to crisp a human in minutes. Mikhail grabbed Raj's ankle before he could disappear inside. You'll fry before you reach the panel. Raj spat out the wrench. It clattered to the floor between them. Then someone get me a damn oven mitt. The joke landed like a lead balloon, but the moment crystallized something terrifying. Their perfect solution had a fatal flaw. Human tech wasn't just messy, it was volatile, unpredictable, and right now, that unpredictability was moments away from tearing apart the Confederacy's capital world. Elena made the call with her hands still buried in wiring. Cut primary containment, the words tasted like ash. Route everything through the emergency buffers. Lynn's head snapped up. That's not a failsafe, that's a controlled detonation waiting to happen. But it'll hold long enough. Elena met Raj's eyes across the shuddering reactor core. If someone's fast, what happened next wasn't in any manual. Raj went up the shaft like a man possessed, armored only in a radiation vest 2 sizes too big. Mikhail Jury rigged a coolant spray from fire extinguishers and broken piping, and Lynn Cool, precise Lynn, started singing some old drinking song from her university days, off-key and too loud, as her hands flew across the overloaded controls. Deep in the reactor's heart, something impossible occurred. The safeties blew in a shower of sparks, but the core didn't fail, it adapted. Human wiring fused with alien circuitry in a shower of golden light, throwing off enough radiation to turn the control room monitors to static. When the dust settled, the reactor wasn't just stable, it was thriving, pulsing like a living thing, its rhythm syncopated and wild. The display screens flickered back to life, showing Confederacy power grids lighting up across 100 worlds. Not with the sterile precision of before, but with the joyous, chaotic energy of something new. Raj collapsed from the access shaft into Mikhail's waiting arms, his skin blistering but his grin intact. "Told you," he croaked, holding up the fried remains of the override panel. Oven mitt, somewhere above them, unbeknownst to the battered team in their crumbling subway lab, the first human-built reactors were already rewriting the laws of physics across the galaxy, not because they were perfect, but because they were stubborn enough to keep working when perfection failed. The alarms weren't just screaming now, they were choking on static, the sound tearing through the control room like a living thing. Radiation warnings painted the walls in pulsing crimson, each flash revealing the grim set of kael'is' jaw as they stared into the reactor chamber's searing light. The final connection point hung suspended over the core, a single unlinked conduit spitting arcs of energy into the air. Someone had to cross that hellish gap. Someone who understood both alien engineering and human stubbornness. kael'is moved before anyone could stop them. Their scarred hands were already sealing the clasps of an emergency containment suit, one designed for Confederacy technicians, not the makeshift horror show they'd built here. Elena grabbed their arm. "The shielding won't hold," she hissed, fingers digging into alien plating. "You'll cook in there." kael'is' answering smile was all sharp edges. "Then I'll cook quickly." They jerked their chin toward the core, where the failing connection spat fractal patterns of light across the ceiling. "That's the problem with your species, Vasquez. You think martyrs are the ones who die, real sacrifice." They tapped their temple, where faint bioluminescent scars traced old rebellion, living with the consequences. The airlock hissed open. The moment kael'is stepped through, the radiation monitors flatlined into screaming red. The team's comms erupted with overlapping shouts, but kael'is' voice sliced through clean, a calm, crackling signal over the storm. "Sealing Junction 7 now." Every word came layered with static, like a voice echoing up from some deep well. On the monitors, Elena watched their silhouette waver as they waded deeper into the reactor's heart. The suit's outer layers were already sloughing off in molten ribbons. Raj's knuckles whitened around a wrench. Lynn's lips moved in silent calculation. How many seconds left? How many degrees before the suit's last failsafe gave out? Then the connection snapped home with a sound like thunder underwater. The reactor's wild pulsing stilled, its rhythm sinking into something stable, something whole. kael'is' comms flared one last time, not with pain, not with fear, with triumph. "Tell them," the transmission fractured, "humans and aliens did this together." The static swallowed the rest. In the control room, the monitors blazed to life, not with warnings, but with scrolling green text as the system stabilized. Dozens of reactors across the galaxy mirrored the change, their energy signatures syncing to this one ragged heartbeat. Mikhail exhaled a string of Russian that would have made his grandmother faint. Raj pressed his forehead to the console like a man praying, and outside, in the streets above their hidden warren of tunnels, something impossible happened. The sky lit up not with explosions, not with dying stars, but with ships, hundreds of them, descending through Earth's atmosphere in formations no human pilot could have dreamed. Confederacy vessels, yes, but among them, rebel freighters, scavenger rigs, even a few battered warships flying colors no one recognized, all broadcasting the same message on every frequency, in every language the planet had ever heard. "We are here," the reactor's hum deepened, steady as a pulse. Somewhere in its glowing heart, a single scorched tool clattered to the floor the wrench kael'is had carried inside. Its metal still radiated heat, but the engravings along the handle were untouched. Two words, crudely etched in both human script and the jagged glyphs of kael'is' people, "Finish it." The screens across Earth's cities flickered to life simultaneously, casting the glow of 1,000 alien suns onto upturned human faces. It wasn't just the High Chancellor's hologram that held them spellbound, it was the backdrop behind him. The once darkened spires of the Confederacy's capital world now blazed with light, their jagged silhouettes etched in gold against a star-strewn sky. Not the sterile blue-white of their old reactors, but the warm, pulsing amber of human engineering. Wexler's mandibles quivered as he spoke, his voice translated into 100 Earth languages at once. "Today," he began, and the weight of those two syllables silenced entire planets, "we witnessed the birth of a new era." The camera panned to show crowds of aliens spilling into the streets, tentacled merchants from water worlds, chitin armored scholars, even the reclusive crystalline beings of the far reaches, all bathed in that unmistakable golden glow. Forged not by the wisdom of elders, nor the purity of ancient science, the High Chancellor's clawed hand gestured toward a feed of Elena's subway lab, where a grease-stained schematic still flickered on a cracked monitor. But by human ingenuity, something seismic happened in that moment, not in the reactors, not in the power grids, in the collective psyche of the galaxy. A thrumming bass note of change reverberated through every species watching. The cheers started small, a group of alien dockworkers on some distant trading hub, their bioluminescent markings flaring bright as they hoisted a handmade banner, two interlocking circles, the universal symbol for partnership, scrawled in what was unmistakably human ink. Then it spread like chain lightning. Cities erupted in harmonies too complex for human ears, their vibrations rattling camera lenses. War fleets still locked in standoff lowered their weapons simultaneously, their crews blinking at sudden floodlights revealing not enemies, but exhausted allies. Back on Earth, Raj stood on a rooftop, watching the alien ships in orbit align their running lights into a single phrase across the night sky, not in Confederacy glyphs. In English, in Mandarin, in Swahili, the words shimmered like a promise. They taught us to see in the dark. Mikhail, ever the engineer, was already dismantling their jury-rigged reactor with a smirk. "Now comes the hard part," he muttered, tossing a burnt-out coil to Lynn, making it look like we knew what we were doing all along, but Elena wasn't listening. She was too busy staring at the live feed from the Confederacy's main energy nexus, where technicians, alien and human alike, were swarming over the gleaming new core. Someone had scratched a tiny, defiant doodle into its casing, a stick figure human giving a thumbs up, and beneath it, in messy but unmistakable alien script, "Thank you for breaking our rules." The stars themselves seemed brighter that night, not because the crisis had ended, but because the galaxy had finally woken up to a simple, terrifying truth. When humans and aliens stopped arguing over who was right and started building what worked, even the darkness had to take a step back. The celebration erupted with the subtlety of a supernova. Across Earth's cities, fireworks painted the sky in colors no human eye had ever seen, gifted by the Confederacy's chemists as a gesture of gratitude. Elena stood on a balcony of the newly christened Interstellar Accord Hall, her reflection warped in the polished alien metal of the walls behind her. The metal around her neck, a swirling disk of metallic hydrogen that hummed at the same frequency as their reactor cores, felt heavier than it looked. Below, the streets teemed with beings from 100 worlds, their laughter and strange harmonies rising like steam from the pavement. Yet for every alien who clasped human hands with genuine warmth, there were others who lingered at the edges of the crowd, their postures tense. Counselor Zyrak's faction hadn't attended the ceremony. Their absence screamed louder than any protest. The whispers slithered through the celebration like winter wind through cracked windows. What do they want in return? No species gives so much without wanting more. Elena caught the murmurs as she passed a cluster of insectoid diplomats from the Crixus Collective. Their compound eyes tracked her with clinical precision. One hissed to another in a language her translator earpiece barely parsed. Like feeding a starved beast, it will only hunger for greater prey. Across the plaza, Raj was too busy demonstrating their reactor schematics to a group of fascinated young aliens to notice the undercurrents. Lin, ever observant, nudged Elena's elbow and nodded toward the upper balconies. There, half hidden in shadow, Zyrak leaned against a railing, his mandibles flexing in what might have been a smile, if smiles could draw blood. The words he tossed down to his aide carried on the rare still moment between cheers. They solved one problem. What else do they want? The aide's answering chuckle was the sound of ice cracking underfoot. Kael'is newly reinstated to the Confederacy Science Directorate, their scars gleaming with freshly applied med-gel materialized at Elena's side. Pay them no mind, they murmured, passing her a drink that shimmered like liquid tungsten. Fear tastes better to some palates than gratitude, but Elena wasn't listening. Her gaze had snagged on a monitor across the square, where the Interstellar news feed cycled footage of human engineers working side by side with aliens on a dozen worlds. The images were hopeful, the headlines less so. Human tech integration sparks sector-wide debate. Who controls the power now? Somewhere in the crowd, a child human, maybe 8 years old, tugged at the tentacle of a bemused Yithian merchant. "Mister," the kid asked, pointing at the floating holo displays of the reactor blueprints, "can we really share everything?" The merchant hesitated just a breath too long before answering. High above, the fireworks reached their crescendo, their alien colors painting the night in hues no human language had names for yet. A fitting metaphor, Elena thought as she slipped the humming medal from her neck and pocketed it. The galaxy was brighter now, but light, as any engineer knew, always cast the sharpest shadows. The reactor schematics glowed across Raj's workstation, their alien glyphs twisting under his fingers as he recalibrated another power distribution node. A routine check, or so he thought until the system hiccuped. One moment he was adjusting flow rates, the next, his screen fractured into nested submenus buried so deep even kael'is hadn't known they existed. "Well, hello there," he muttered, prying open encryption layers with tools Lin had coded for scraping Confederate firewalls. What spilled out wasn't technical data. It was ledgers, thousands of entries meticulously logged, energy allocations diverted from hospitals, schools, even planetary defense grids, all rerouted to private storage facilities stamped with the insignia of the Zyrak Consortium. The numbers danced mockingly as Raj traced the paths. Entire sectors left to freeze while vaults brimmed with enough crystalline energy to power civilizations. His hands shook, not from fatigue, not from radiation sickness, from the sheer, scalding clarity of betrayal. They starved their own people for profit. The words tore from his throat raw and ragged, bouncing off the subway tunnel's curved walls. Lin spun in her chair, diagnostics forgotten, Mikhail's wrench clattered to the floor. Even Elena, halfway through welding a coolant pipe, froze mid-spark. Raj slammed his palm against the console, sending holograms scattering like startled birds. "Look at this," Zalvaris colony rationing down to 4 hours of light per cycle, while 23 fully charged cores sat in a warehouse orbiting their damn capital. The screen flickered to a security feed, emaciated insectoid younglings huddled under thermal blankets as a luxury starliner streaked overhead, its engines burning enough energy to power their slums for months. Kael'is materialized at his shoulder, their usual sardonic mask gone. "Those are restricted fiscal archives." Their voice lacked its usual harmonics, flattened by something human enough to recognize. "Shame." Elena's fingers left smears of soot on the stolen data as she zoomed in on timestamps. This isn't just greed. Her thumb hovered over a date 1 week before the Confederacy's public announcement of the energy crisis. They engineered the collapse. Silence thickened like cooling magma. Outside their tunnel, celebrations still echoed across the city, fireworks painting the sky in colors named for alien constellations no human had ever seen before last month. The irony tasted like bile. They'd torn themselves apart trying to fix a disaster that was never truly a disaster, just business. Mikhail was the first to move, snatching up his wrench with a violence that made the tool's molecular edge hum. "So what now?" We hand this to their news feeds, watch the galaxy burn. Raj's laugh sounded nothing like joy. "Better question what happens when trillion-credit empires realize we can track their dirty laundry." His screen flickered again, this time showing intercepted transmissions. Xyrax board members discussing containment protocols, asset liquidation, contingency plans involving rogue human elements. The reactor's hum deepened around them, its golden light catching the sweat on Lynn's forehead as she reached for her sidearm, not a tool she'd ever used. "Not until today, we didn't just crack their energy crisis." She thumbed off the safety with a click that echoed like a vault door slamming shut. "We cracked their lies." Somewhere above, the fireworks reached their crescendo, great, blooming spheres of light that cast the city in momentary brilliance before fading to smoke. Down in the dark, 5 faces turned toward monitors pulsing with damning truths, the air between them charged with a new kind of energy, the kind that topples empires. Kael'is exhaled a harmonic that made the loose cabling vibrate. "Congratulations, humans," they murmured, claws tapping a staccato rhythm against their holstered disruptor. "You've just upgraded from engineers to existential threats." Across the void, unseen in the celebration's glow, 1,000 dormant security drones blinked awake. Elena's fingers hovered over the console's final keystroke, the weight of 1,000 stolen ledgers pressing against her ribs. One tap, that's all it would take to hurl the Confederacy's darkest secret into the galactic ether. No encryption, no diplomacy, just raw truth screaming across every public channel from here to the far reaches. Raj's hand caught her wrist, his grip trembling. "Do this, and there's no pretending we're neutral engineers anymore." Behind him, Kael'is' bioluminescent scars pulsed like warning beacons. She tapped send. The data didn't just spread, it detonated. Within minutes, alien news feeds erupted with damning figures. Energy quotas siphoned from orphanages, hospitals, entire famine-struck colonies all funneled into Xyrax's private reserves. The reaction wasn't outrage, it was revolution. Security footage from the crystalline cities of Vexus Prime showed protesters shattering opulent storefronts with salvaged reactor rods, their chants vibrating through the streets. "You dimmed our skies, now we burn your lies." On Zalthar, dockworkers seized control of a confiscated freighter. Its cargo holds bursting with hoarded power cores they rerouted to slums in real time. Then came the moment no one predicted. A masked figure scaled the obsidian gates of the High Chancellor's compound, their face obscured by a scarf woven in human-made solar fabric. When they yanked down the Confederacy's banner, the crowd beneath them roared, the protester's voice amplified by a smuggled comlink, sliced through the chaos. Humanity gave us power. They thrust a stolen plasma cutter skyward, its glow painting the mob in gold. Now we take our freedom. The clip went supernova. Rioters on a dozen worlds began stitching that same solar fabric into makeshift flags, their once divisive bioluminescent caste markings now interwoven with human circuit patterns. Even neutral systems blinked awake, their leaders scrambling to broadcast hasty reforms before the fire reached their doors. Back in the subway lab, Mikhail watched the feeds with a wrench clutched like a talisman. We just kicked over the biggest hornet's nest in history. Kael'is' answering grin was all sharp edges. No, they corrected, tracing the trajectory of a rebel fleet streaking toward Zyrak's orbital vaults. We gave them the matches. Somewhere in the chaos, a single reactor flared to life without permission, its design unmistakably human, its activation codes overridden by the very people it was built to exploit. The galaxy's night had never burned so bright. The High Chancellor's holographic form shimmered into existence above the makeshift war table, his carapace polished to a ceremonial gleam. Gone was the derision, the barely concealed contempt. In its place stood something far more dangerous: respect. By unanimous decree of the Confederacy ruling synod, his voice resonated through the subway tunnels like a struck gong. Humanity is offered a permanent seat among the stars. Behind him, the assembled alien dignitaries bowed in perfect unison, their bioluminescent markings pulsing gold for the first time in recorded history. Elena's fingers twitched against the reactor schematics still glowing on her tablet, the weight of the moment pressed down like a collapsing star. A seat on the synod meant more than prestige, it meant control over energy distribution, trade routes, even military deployments across 1,000 worlds. Raj let out a strangled noise halfway between a cheer and a sob. Lynn's lips moved soundlessly, tracing the implications. Only Mikhail remained stone-faced, his grip tightening around a plasma wrench like it was the only anchor in a storm. "They'll gut us for this back home," he muttered, low enough that the aliens couldn't hear. He wasn't wrong. Earth's fractured governments had tolerated their rogue operation only because it served national interests. But now, the United Nations security feeds on Elena's secondary screen told the story: emergency summits, defense ministers whispering into encrypted channels, the flicker of orbital defense platforms powering to active status. Offers of interstellar power didn't unify nations, they made them ravenous. kael'is materialized at her elbow, their usual sardonic edge dulled by something resembling concern. "Your leaders are already demanding the seat go to a properly vetted representative." Their claw tapped a data stream, showing 5 different Earth factions drawing up competing candidate lists. "They think this is about politics." Elena's laugh came out sharper than intended. Of course they did. To Earth's power brokers, the Confederacy's offer wasn't an honor, it was leverage. A prize to be carved up in backroom deals, its influence diluted across a dozen squabbling committees. She could already see the bureaucratic nightmare: endless debates over rotational representation, veto powers, which terrestrial superpower got to hold the shiny new toy first. The High Chancellor mistook her hesitation for humility. "Your species has earned this," he intoned, mandibles flexing in what passed for earnestness among his kind. "No longer petitioners at our gates, now architects of the future." Metal groaned as Mikhail slammed his wrench onto the table. "Bullshit. The aliens flinched at the human profanity. "You don't want architects, you want scarecrows." His gesture took in the ruined lab, the scorched schematics, the team's exhausted faces. "Put the monkeys on the council, show the galaxy how progressive you are, then keep doing business as usual once the cameras are off." Silence thicker than reactor shielding settled over the room. The truth of it hung in the air between them, undeniable. Humanity's seat would come with conditions, restricted committees, classified sub-clauses, 1,000 ways to neuter their influence while parading them as symbols of unity. Elena studied the High Chancellor's hologram, searching for the flicker of calculation beneath the ceremonial grandeur. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of molten lead. "We'll take the seat, a beat, but not your terms." The schematics on her tablet shifted, zooming out to reveal a sprawling network, not of reactors, but of alliances. Rebel holds, black market docks, the same patchwork of dissent that had smuggled them parts when the Confederacy tried to crush their work. "The Synod gets human representation," she continued, tapping the map until it bloomed crimson with highlighted systems. "But so do they." For the first time since the crisis began, the High Chancellor looked genuinely unsettled. The holo feed glitched as he processed the implication. Humanity wouldn't just join the galaxy's ruling body. They'd drag the galaxy's disenfranchised in with them. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the subway vents, painting the reactor's battered casing in streaks of gold. Somewhere above them, Earth's politicians were already scheming, unaware that the real negotiation had just begun, not over who held power, but over who got to redefine it. The emergency council chamber reeked of sweat and ambition, the air thick with the static of too many translators choking on overlapping arguments. General Zhang's fist hit the marble table hard enough to crack the Confederacy's ceremonial datapad lying there. "We didn't haul their civilization back from the brink out of charity." His dress uniform medals clinked like coins tossed onto a gambling table. "First contact protocols be damned. This is conquest by other means." Across the room, the European delegate recoiled as if struck, her holopad projecting frantic legal analyses that dissolved in the glare of Zhang's conviction. Elena edged backward, her shoulder blades pressing into the cold wall as the debate raged. They'd been summoned to advise Earth's unified government, but this wasn't consultation. It was a feeding frenzy. On the main display, the High Chancellor's offer looped silently, its elegant glyphs now weaponized by every faction in the room. The African Union delegation wanted trading monopolies. The Pacific Coalition muttered about security buffers in nearby star systems. And Zhang, his officers were already circling resource maps of the Confederacy's core worlds like vultures over carrion. What happens when they rebuild? The quiet question came from the Brazilian science minister, her fingers tracing the scarred subway lab logo still visible on Elena's jacket. "Will we be partners then? Or just the latest empire they need to overthrow?" A new voice cut through the noise. Secretary General Al-Farsi, his usually composed face pinched with exhaustion. "The vote stands at dawn." He didn't need to specify which vote. The emergency measure circulating through back channels was blunt as a hammer. Claim the Confederacy's seat, yes, but also claim its abandoned shipyards, its derelict outposts, every piece of salvageable tech floating in the dark. Elena's stomach turned. She'd seen that hunger before, in Zyrak's faction, in the looted vaults of hoarded energy cores. The realization hit like a reactor surge. Humanity wasn't inheriting a role as galactic peacemakers. We were becoming exactly what we'd fought against. Outside the polarized windows, Earth's first interstellar dreadnought glinted in dry dock, its armor plating scavenged from surrendered Confederacy vessels. The engineers called it Pax Humana. The name tasted like ashes. Across the chamber, Zhang caught her eye and smiled, the kind of smile shared between hunters who have spotted the same prey. Elena's hand crept toward her comm, dialing the only number that mattered now. Raj answered on the first tone, his voice tinny with distance and the hum of a jury-rigged starship engine. "Took you long enough," he said, as though they'd planned this all along. Some revolutions weren't fought with guns or reactors, but with the quiet betrayal of walking away. The lab's old schematics glowed on Elena's wrist display, not the clean lines of the finalized designs, but the original, reckless blueprints from the subway days. The ones with the hidden failsafes. Dawn was coming, and with it a choice: stand with Earth's new empire or burn every bridge back to it. Elena's comm unit buzzed with the 17th priority alert from Earth's unified government, the red pulse of the screen casting her exhaustion into sharp relief. Across the lab, kael'is watched with alien amusement as she silenced it with a tap that verged on violence. "Your rulers," they observed, their voice layered with harmonics that made the word "rulers" sound like a slur, "are very loud for people who didn't believe in this project 6 weeks ago." The choice crystallized with brutal simplicity when the ultimatum came: not a request, not a negotiation, a demand: hand over all reactor designs and command codes to Earth's newly formed Interstellar Oversight Directorate. The unspoken subtext blazed brighter than any reactor core. This wasn't about stewardship, it was about control, about replicating the very hoarding systems they'd fought to dismantle. Elena turned to the cracked subway wall, where someone, probably Raj during a caffeine crash, had scrawled their founding principle in permanent marker: light for all or none at all. The words had seemed naive then, now they tasted like prophecy. She activated the public broadcast array without consulting Earth's sensors, without even warning her team. The feed went live across every Confederacy and human network simultaneously, her face streaked with coolant grease and her sleeves rolled up past elbows, still bruised from hauling reactor parts. No podium, no flags, just the subway lab's chaos as a backdrop and a single sentence that would ignite political firestorms on 2 worlds: "We won't repeat their mistakes." The details followed in blunt, unpolished strokes: a new coalition, answerable to neither Earth nor the Confederacy's fractured councils, a guild of engineers and scientists from a dozen species, its membership scrawled on the same kind of grease-stained napkins that had birthed their first reactor designs. Lin's quantum algorithms would govern access, not politicians. Mikhail's failsafes would prevent stockpiling, and kael'is' rogue network would ensure no one human or alien could silence them again. Earth's response was instantaneous. The United Nations revoked their credentials. General Zhang's dreadnoughts were ordered to intercept any unauthorized energy shipments. But they'd underestimated the thing they'd created: not just a technology, but a movement. Dockworkers on Mars refused to load confiscation orders. Alien freighters changed transponder codes mid-flight to avoid tracking. And in the shadows between the stars, something unprecedented took root: a shared cause that made rebels of mechanics and mutineers of diplomats. By the time the first independent reactor lit up a Confederacy fringe world without approval from either government, the backlash had already begun to crumble under its own weight. Because you couldn't arrest an idea any more than you could bottle sunlight, especially when that idea had learned to fight back. The air in the docking bay smelled of ionized metal and the sharp tang of leaking coolant, too much like the subway lab's final hours. Elena adjusted the makeshift breather over her nose, scanning the shadows between grounded freighters for movement. The official celebrations had ended, but the real work never did. Somewhere in the maze of abandoned shipyards, Zyrak's faction still festered like an unscrubbed wound. The first shot shattered the silence with the precision of a scalpel. It grazed Elena's shoulder before embedding itself in the docking bay wall, the impact spraying flecks of molten durasteel across her cheek. No warning. No theatrics, just cold, professional extermination. She hit the deck rolling, her body moving faster than her mind could process the betrayal, not from the Confederacy, but from her own instincts. She'd let herself believe the fight was over. The second shot never came. Instead, a chorus of guttural clicks and hisses erupted from the overhead gantries. Figures dropped like weighted shadows, their movements too fluid, too synchronized to be anything but hunters, not human, not even Confederacy enforcers. These were the fringe dwellers, the species too stubborn or too savage to bend to the Synod's rule. Their leader, a halting mass of chitin and scar tissue, hauled Zyrak into the flickering light by what passed for his neck. The disgraced counselor's mandibles spasmed, his once pristine carapace now dented and leaking viscous blue from a dozen wounds. Little human, the vigilante's voice was the scrape of a blade against bone. He shoved Zyrak forward until his faceplate hovered inches from Elena's. This one thought the dark still belonged to him. A clawed hand flexed, and the sound that followed wasn't language, it was vibration, a subsonic pulse that made the docking bay's lights hum in dissonant harmony. Around them, a dozen alien voices took up the rhythm, their bioluminescence flaring like torchlight, passed hand to hand through generations of defiance. The message wasn't spoken. It was etched into the air itself, a truth so primal even the translators couldn't soften it. Harm the human, and you harm us all. Zyrak's laugh was a broken thing, rattling through damaged vocal membranes. You think this changes anything? He spat a glob of blue onto Elena's boots. Your kind are still locusts. You'll devour yourselves soon enough. The vigilante didn't dignify that with an answer, just tightened his grip until something in Zyrak's carapace cracked audibly. We remember who gave us light when our own rulers left us to freeze, he said, dragging the counselor backward into the shadows. Now they remember too. Elena didn't watch them leave. Her gaze was fixed on the docking bay floor, where Zyrak's abandoned disruptor lay smoking, not aimed at her, but at the reactor schematics still glowing on her wrist display. The realization hit like a rogue current. This hadn't been an assassination attempt. It was a message, and somewhere in the dark, an entire galaxy was learning to write back. The memorial wasn't carved from marble or gleaming alien alloys. It was forged from the twisted remains of the reactor core kael'is had died fixing. Suspended in the central atrium of the newly christened kael'is Volkov Institute, the warped metal pulsed with a soft golden light, its surface etched with equations in both human script and the harmonic glyphs of kael'is' people. Visitors, alien and human alike, touched their foreheads to the base, leaving behind faint smudges of grease, ink, or bioluminescent fluid, not reverence. Not mourning, a promise. Elena ran her fingers over the latest addition to the display, kael'is' last wrench, its handle still scorched from the reactor breach. Behind her, the atrium buzzed with a cacophony of clattering tools and overlapping languages. A Yithian engineer argued good-naturedly with a human grad student over coffee that smelled alarmingly like liquid ozone. A cluster of crystalline scholars from the far reaches tapped at holographic schematics with appendages that changed density to simulate human touchscreens. The air smelled like soldering metal and something unfamiliar, sharp and herbal, an alien spice one of the cooks had brought from a world without a name in any Earth tongue. That's when she felt the tug. The child barely reached Elena's waist, their carapace still soft at the edges, their four eyes wide with the luminous curiosity of a species that had never known darkness until the energy crisis. In halting Galactic Common, they asked the question that would later be carved above the Institute's main doors. "Will you teach us?" Elena crouched until they were eye to eye. Around them, the noise didn't hush. No one stopped to witness the moment, because this wasn't an epochal event, just another Tuesday in a place where miracles had become mundane. She plucked a spare wrench from her belt and pressed it into the child's primary gripping limb. "We'll learn together," she said, nodding toward the workbench where Lynn was already beckoning them over. Starting with why duct tape fixes everything, the child's answering chirp harmonized perfectly with the reactor's hum. Somewhere in the walls, the ghost of kael'is' laughter echoed through the vents, not in grief, but in the sheer, stubborn joy of a system that refused to stay broken. The zero-point reactors spread like dandelion seeds on a solar wind, first to the Confederacy's famine-struck colonies, then to the rebel holds, and finally, in open defiance of both governments, to the uncharted fringe worlds where no flags flew. Within a year, the phrase "energy rationing" faded from every language in the known galaxy, replaced by something far more dangerous. Why not? Historians would later call it the Great Recalculation. Not just the end of scarcity, but the death of excuses. Shipyards that had taken generations to construct now rose in months. Medical AIs, once restricted to elite enclaves, cured plagues in the slums of 100 worlds. And somewhere in the asteroid belts of an unremarkable system, a child born without lungs breathed for the first time inside an atmosphere generator built from stolen schematics and sheer spite. The broadcasts began as whispers, a Zaltharian scholar piecing together the events of that single, impossible week. Her holochronicles narrated over footage of human engineers elbow-deep in alien reactors, both groups laughing as coolant sprayed their faces. Then came the monuments, not towering effigies of heroes, but practical things. A power substation on Vexus Prime, its walls etched with the names of every technician who died keeping the lights on during the crisis. A hydroponic farm on Earth's moon, its glass panels fused with shards of Confederate hull plating, and on a nameless rock at the galaxy's edge, a single rusted wrench bolted to a plaque that read, "They told us to fix the problem. We fixed the rules instead." The historian's final transmission went viral across 3,000 star systems, her voice trembling with the weight of revelation. "We measure epochs by disasters averted," she said, the camera panning to show a bustling interspecies market where energy cells traded hands like candies. But humanity gave us something stranger, a disaster that never had the chance to exist. Behind her, a child stacked reactor components into a wobbling tower, their design already evolving into forms neither human nor alien, but something wonderfully new. And high above it all, the reactors hummed on, golden, imperfect, and utterly unstoppable. The viewport framed Earth like a blue-green jewel suspended in velvet darkness, its continents stitched with the faint glow of cities that had once fought over scraps of power. Elena leaned against the alien alloy of the observation deck, her reflection superimposed over the planet, fractured and indistinct, like the legacy they'd left behind. Raj materialized beside her, tossing a pilfered Confederacy nutrient bar from hand to hand. "Think they'll ever forgive us for sharing the spotlight?" His grin was all teeth, but his knuckles whitened around the railing. They'd seen the reports. Earth's government still bickered over their unauthorized philanthropy, draft resolutions condemning the rogue engineers who'd given away humanity's competitive edge. A Martian mining consortium had even filed a lawsuit over the open-source reactor schematics, claimed they'd devalued energy futures. The irony clung like reactor soot. Elena exhaled, watching her breath fog the viewport. The universe is bigger than grudges. Outside, the stars weren't just points of light anymore, they were destinations. Colony ships and generation arcs speckled the black, their trajectories fanning out like cracks in a dam. Some followed official transit lanes, most didn't. Raj's laughter cut through the silence. Tell that to the admiral who threatened to court-martial us if we ever dock at Jupiter Station again. The ship's AI chose that moment to chime in, its voice smooth as molten glass. Preparing jump to uncharted sector Theta 9. Probability of indigenous civilizations, 68%. It paused, then added with synthetic mischief. Probability of existing energy infrastructure, 0.2%. Elena's fingers found the schematics on her wrist display, not the polished final drafts, but the original Subway Lab scrawls, complete with coffee stains and Raj's doodles in the margins. Somewhere in the uncharted dark, another species might be staring at their own dying reactors, whispering prayers to gods who wouldn't answer. The jump drive whined to life, its vibrations thrumming through the deck plates. Raj bumped her shoulder with his last chance to turn back. We could still claim we were kidnapped by rogue elements. The stars beyond the viewport blurred first, then streaked, then vanished. Elena didn't look away. Why would we? The ship shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space, and for a heartbeat, she swore she heard kael'is' voice in the harmonics of the engines. Not a farewell, a challenge. Some revolutions didn't end with fireworks. They ended with a flickering light in the dark, and the quiet certainty that someone, somewhere, would see it and start walking. The first anniversary celebration stretched across the stars like a net of golden fire parties erupting simultaneously on desert moons and ocean planets, in crystalline cities and human spaceports, all synchronized to the moment 1 year prior when 1,000 reactors had flickered back to life. The centerpiece was Earth's lunar plaza, where reconstructed alien architecture butted against gleaming human skyscrapers, their surfaces alive with holograms showing the same speech translated into 300 tongues. Elena stood at the podium, her hands still bearing the faint scars from reactor burns, the sleeves of her formal jacket rolled up in quiet defiance of diplomatic protocol. The crowd wasn't what anyone expected, not the polished dignitaries who'd fought them at every turn, but the ones who'd built the future with grease-stained hands, human engineers shoulder to shoulder with Yithian mechanics, Vexian scholars trading notes with Martian dockworkers. Even the air smelled different, heavy with alien spices from food stalls, where a Crixus chef was teaching humans how to properly caramelize crystalline sugars. Elena's voice cut through the hum of celebration, amplified just enough to ripple across the plaza without drowning out the laughter of a group of children nearby. They were building a model reactor from scrap parts, their tiny hands struggling to hold both wrenches and translator earpieces. 1 year ago, she began, not to the cameras but to those children, we proved something dangerous. A holographic display flickered to life behind her, showing the Subway Lab's ruins, that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy could learn from the so-called primitive ones. That desperation makes better allies than pride ever could. The footage changed clips from across the Confederacy, a Zaltharian midwife using human-designed battery warmers to save premature hatchlings. A human farmer coaxing crops from dead soil with alien atmospheric regulators, and everywhere the reactors pulsed, their golden light now so commonplace no one even remarked on them anymore. Elena stepped back from the podium as the holograms dissolved into star maps, new trade routes glowing like neural pathways across the dark. They told us we had 7 days, she said, nodding to where Raj and Lynn stood with a gaggle of alien engineers, all arguing good-naturedly over a disassembled thruster. But what we really had was each other. The crowd erupted not in applause, but in something stranger, a Vexian hum blended with human cheers, Crixus wingbeats thrummed against drum rhythms from the Jovian colonies. The noise shouldn't have harmonized. It did, as fireworks tore open the sky patterns designed by a joint team of human and Ythian pyrotechnicians. No one noticed the two figures lingering at the plaza's edge. Kael'is' surviving kin stood beside Mikhail, their scars gleaming under the lights. Neither spoke, they didn't need to. Behind them, the newest reactor model sat humming on a makeshift pedestal, its casing left deliberately unfinished so passers-by could add their own modifications. The first inscription, etched in both human and Vexian script, read, "For the next crisis," and the one after that. High above, forgotten by everyone, an unmarked ship angled its nose toward uncharted space. Inside, the comm system crackled with reports of a stellar flare threatening a fledgling colony on the rim. The crew, 3 humans, 2 Ythians, and 1 very disgruntled Confederacy deserter exchanged glances. Then, as one, they reached for their tools. The galaxy kept turning, the work never ended, and somewhere in the dark, a light blinked on.